November 8, 1942. Sidi Farak Beach, Algeria. The first American infantry forces came ashore during the North African invasion. Among the crates unloaded onto the sand were weapons that most soldiers had never seen before. Inside the boxes marked "Secret" were 5,000 M1 rocket launchers, soon to be known worldwide as bazookas. At that moment, very few troops had any idea how to operate them. Yet within 18 months, this $25 steel tube would completely disrupt German armored tactics and force them to rush out copies of their own. The balance of tank warfare was about to shift, not through massive artillery or complicated machinery, but through a shoulder-fired weapon so simple that any infantryman could learn it in an afternoon. With the bazooka, ordinary soldiers were no longer helpless against tanks, they were hunters. The story began at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, on May 6, 1942. Colonel Leslie Skinner and Lieutenant Edward Uhl arrived to demonstrate a new anti-tank launcher. The weapon itself was improvised on the spot. Uhl had found a steel tube in a scrap pile that just happened to fit the right rocket diameter. Using pliers, he bent a coat hanger into makeshift sights. Army Ordnance had arranged for tests that day of British spigot mortars, heavy devices weighing more than 100 pounds and requiring trained crews. Senior officers, including Major General Gladian Barnes, Chief of Research and Engineering, were focused on the British weapons and paid little attention to Uhl's crude launcher. The trial changed everything. 5 spigot mortars fired at a moving M3 Stuart tank from 150 yards. Not one hit its target. Their bulky design and difficult sighting systems made them nearly useless. Then Uhl stepped forward with his tube. Wearing a welder's mask in case the backblast was dangerous, he shouldered the launcher, lined up the bent coat hanger sights, and fired. The rocket shot out cleanly and slammed into the tank's side. He reloaded in 5 seconds and struck the target again. General Barnes reportedly looked at the weapon and said, "It looks like Bob Burns's bazooka," referring to the comedian's odd homemade instrument. On the spot, Barnes ordered 5,000 units for immediate production. General Electric moved quickly, and by October 1942, factories were turning out 5,000 launchers every month. The speed was remarkable. Just 5 months from prototype to mass production. Each M1 was made from a 54-inch seamless steel tube, 36 inches in diameter, weighing 13 pounds. The shoulder stock held 2 dry cell batteries to ignite the rocket. The M6 rocket itself cost $8 to produce and could pierce 3 to 4 inches of armor at 300 yards. The entire launcher cost only $25. Training officers quickly realized its value. Captain Franklin Johnson at Fort Benning reported that a soldier could be trained to use the bazooka effectively in 1 afternoon, compared to the weeks required to master a 37mm anti-tank gun. More importantly, 2 men with a bazooka could go anywhere the infantry went, carrying tank-killing power on their shoulders. Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa, began on November 8, 1942. The 1st Infantry Division, 1st Armored Division, and the 509th Parachute Infantry Regiment were among the units equipped with the new rocket launchers. But there was a serious flaw. None of the troops had received training. Eisenhower himself only learned the night before the landings that the bazookas had been shipped in sealed crates marked "Secret," with orders not to open them until the invasion began. No manuals or instructions were provided. The results were mixed. Many of the rockets had been damaged by sea moisture and misfired. The 509th Parachute Infantry reported that out of their first 20 rockets fired in combat, only 7 worked properly. Despite this, there were successes. On November 10, 1942, the 1st Armored Division recorded that an anti-tank team destroyed 2 Vichy French Renault tanks near Port Lyautey with the new rocket weapon. Their log noted, "Weapon effective when functioning properly." German forces soon got their hands on the bazooka. During the Battle of Kasserine Pass from February 14 to 24, 1943, elements of the Afrika Korps' 10th and 21st Panzer divisions overran American positions and captured stockpiles of equipment. Among the seized weapons were 5 intact M1 launchers and about 20 M6 rockets. These were shipped to Berlin for analysis. By February 28, 1943, the German Army Weapons Testing Facility at Kummersdorf had the American launchers in hand. Technical reports filed in March 1943, now preserved in the Bundesarchiv, described the bazooka as a lightweight and highly effective infantry anti-tank weapon. Their evaluation stated, weight 6 kilograms, production requirements minimal, penetrates 80 millimeters of armor at 100 meters, can be mass-produced with basic industry. Impressed, German engineers quickly developed their own version, enlarging the warhead diameter from 60 mm to 88 mm. By September 1943, the Raketenpanzer Büchse 43, better known as the Panzerschreck, entered mass production in Germany. Factory records show that 289,151 Panzerschrecks were built during the war. While an impressive figure, it still fell far behind American numbers. The bazooka reached maturity during Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily that began on July 10, 1943. By then, American troops were equipped with the improved M1A1 model, which featured stronger electrical connections and the more dependable M6A1 rocket. One of the most remarkable bazooka successes in Sicily occurred near Biscari in July 1943. According to U.S. Army Ordnance Observer reports, a team from the 82nd Airborne Division fired a shot that struck a Tiger I tank directly through its driver's vision slot, one of the few weak points on that armored giant. While this hit reflected exceptional aim rather than typical results, it proved the weapon could defeat even Germany's heaviest tanks under the right conditions. The Hermann Göring Panzer Division took note. In its war diary dated July 11, 1943, commanders recorded, "Enemy infantry equipped with rocket weapons capable of destroying armor at 100 to 150 meters. Tank commanders must exercise increased caution in urban areas." Colonel James Gavin, who commanded the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, reported, "The bazooka has given the American infantrymen confidence against enemy armor. In Sicily, we destroyed 17 German tanks with bazookas. The psychological effect exceeds even the physical destruction." As the Italian campaign began in September 1943, the bazooka evolved from a tank killer into a multi-purpose weapon. The rugged mountains and narrow medieval towns provided perfect conditions for its use. During the December 1943 battle for Ortona, Canadian records describe how bazooka teams developed mouse-holing tactics, blasting openings through walls so infantry could move between buildings without risking the streets. The 1st Canadian Infantry Division's war diary noted, "American rocket launchers proved invaluable in street fighting, used against fortified houses with good effect." By January 1944, American factories were turning out 20,000 bazookas each month. The new M9 version had appeared, designed to break down into 2 pieces for airborne transport. It also used a magneto-ignition system that eliminated the need for batteries. The updated M6A3 rocket featured a blunt nose that reduced the chance of ricochet when striking angled armor. Reports from 5th Army in Italy recorded that each infantry battalion now carried between 24 and 36 bazookas, making them as common as machine guns. This widespread use forced the Germans to adjust. Wehrmacht Training Directive 43-18, issued in December 1943, ordered that tanks must never advance into urban areas without infantry support. All nearby buildings had to be cleared before armor moved forward, and a minimum distance of 100 meters had to be kept from uncleared structures. Crews were also instructed to maintain shirts and side skirts on their vehicles at all times. German units began welding spare track links, adding sandbags, and even pouring concrete on their tanks for extra defense. Zimmerit paste, applied between December 1943 and October 1944, was partly intended to counter shaped charge weapons like the bazooka. A captured document from the 2nd SS Panzer Division in March 1944 admitted, "American rocket launchers present in every infantry unit. Speed and shock tactics no longer viable. Methodical advance with infantry screening required." By D-Day, June 6, 1944, the bazooka had become an essential part of U.S. infantry structure. Among the 156,000 Allied troops who landed in Normandy were thousands of bazooka teams armed with the new M9A1, which featured an optical sight for improved accuracy. The hedgerows of Normandy created natural strongpoints, and the bazooka proved highly effective in this environment. First Army records show that in the first 6 weeks after D-Day, bazookas accounted for 12% of all German armored vehicle losses in the American sector. The 29th Infantry Division's after-action report for June and July 1944 stated that bazooka teams in the hedgerows achieved strong success against enemy armor. German industry tried to respond with the Panzerschreck. On paper it was more powerful, using an 88mm warhead that could penetrate up to 160 meters of armor, compared to the bazooka's 100mm. But production was slower and more expensive. German and American records show that each Panzerschreck required 18 man-hours to build and cost 150 Reichsmarks. In contrast, the M9 bazooka needed only 152 man-hours and cost $25. By August 1944, the United States had already produced more than 400,000 bazookas, nearly double Germany's total production of Panzerschrecks for the entire war. The German Ardennes offensive in December 1944 put the bazooka through one of its toughest tests, combat in freezing winter conditions. The 99th Infantry Division collected numerous reports of bazooka engagements. On December 17, 1944, Technical Sergeant Donald Bracken of the 394th Infantry Regiment described knocking out a Panther tank near Rauscherath. He fired from about 75 yards, striking the rear engine deck. The tank burst into flames and its crew abandoned it. The extreme cold caused problems. In the older M1A1 launchers still in use, batteries often failed. Soldiers sometimes had to keep the batteries inside their jackets to keep them warm enough to work. The 2nd Infantry Division reported that in sub-zero weather, rocket propellant burned differently, which reduced range and accuracy. Even with these difficulties, records from 19 Airborne Corps state that bazooka teams destroyed or disabled 9 German armored vehicles during the Battle of the Yao Bulge. One of the most remarkable individual uses of the weapon came from Major Charles Carpenter of the 4th Armored Division, as confirmed in his Silver Star citation and backed by eyewitness accounts. Major Charles Carpenter turned the bazooka into something never imagined by its designers. Flying an L-4 Grasshopper observation plane, he mounted 6 M9 launchers to its wings. Records from the 4th Armored Division verify his combat results. On September 20, 1944, he destroyed 2 Panther tanks near Aricourt. In October 1944, he scored a kill on a Panzer IV. By November 1944, he had destroyed 3 more armored vehicles. In 2017, Carpenter's original aircraft, still fitted with its bazooka brackets, was rediscovered in an Austrian museum and restored. His bold idea proved the weapon could be adapted far beyond the infantry battlefield. Final U.S. production totals, according to Army Ordnance records, were staggering. 12,790 units M1, A1 about 60,000 units M9, 26,087 units M9, also about 277,800 units M18 aluminum model, 500 units Grand, total 476,628 launchers produced. Rocket production was even more impressive. 1942, $2,000. 1943, $2,847,000. 1964, $8,566,000. 1945, $4,165,000 overall. Total, 15,630,000 rockets. Unit costs in 1945 were remarkably low. An M1 or M9 bazooka cost between $19 and $25. The M6A3 rocket cost $885. A full kit, 1 launcher and 10 rockets came to around. Compare that to German tanks. A Panzer IV cost 103,000 Reichsmarks, roughly $41,000. A Panther tank cost 117,000 Reichsmarks, about $47,000. A Tiger I cost $250,000 Reichsmarks, equal to $100,000. For the price of a single Tiger, the U.S. could equip almost 900 bazooka teams. Army studies in 1945 analyzed how the weapon actually performed. The average engagement range was 75 yards. At 50 yards, a trained team had an 85% chance of hitting a target. At 100 yards, the probability dropped to 42%, and at 150 yards, only 18%. Using the M6A3 rocket, armor penetration reached between 3.5 and 4 inches, or 89 to 102 mm. Tank loss data from First Army records in Europe showed the following breakdown. Destroyed by other tanks, 38%. Destroyed by anti-tank guns, 31%. Destroyed by aircraft, 14%. Destroyed by bazookas, 12%. Destroyed by mines, 5%. Even this 12% figure likely understates the bazooka's effect, since many German crews abandoned vehicles once bazooka teams appeared nearby, counting as non-combat losses. Post-war interrogations added further context. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, Germany's commander in Italy, admitted that American rocket launchers forced him to change tactical doctrine. Blitz-style shock tactics that had worked in 1940 and 1941 were no longer possible. General Heinz Guderian, writing after the war, also acknowledged that the spread of infantry anti-tank weapons, including the bazooka, ended the era of independent tank operations. German design changes reflected this reality. Panzer III and Panzer IV models received side skirts starting in April 1943. Zimmerit anti-magnetic paste was applied, beginning in September 1943. The Panther G model had thicker side armor. Variants designed for infantry support carried heavier machine guns and cannons for use against enemy bazooka teams. These modifications added weight and complexity, reducing mobility. Meanwhile, American tanks kept their simpler, reliable design. Lend-Lease shipments spread bazookas to Allied nations. Soviet Union, 8,000 units. United Kingdom, 12,000 units. Free French forces, 15,000 units. Chinese nationalist forces, 3,000 units. Other Allied nations combined, 23,628 units. Soviet records indicate they considered the bazooka useful, but continued to rely more heavily on anti-tank rifles, and later developed the RPG-2, which borrowed key features from the American design. In the Pacific, the bazooka proved just as valuable. Marine Corps records from Saipan, June to July 1944, show that bazooka teams destroyed 28 Japanese tanks and countless bunkers. Different rocket types gave it versatility. The M6A3 anti-tank round, the M10 white phosphorus for smoke and fire, and the M7A3 practice round. Marines especially valued white phosphorus rockets for blasting caves and fortifications. At Iwo Jima, the 5th Marine Division fired 1,147 bazooka rounds in 6 weeks of combat. The weapon carried into Korea. Early in the war, M9A1 bazookas with aging ammunition struggled against North Korean T-34-85 tanks. Within 90 days, the new 3.5-inch M20 Super Bazooka was fielded. It restored effectiveness. Marine Sergeant Robert Bennett reported from Busan in September 1950. The new 3.5-inch bazookas stopped T-34s cold. First shot, first kill at 125 yards. The psychological shift was immediate. This rapid adaptation showed the strength of the design. The bazooka reflected the American wartime approach to weapons: simple construction, quick production, and the ability to scale. With nothing more than basic welding equipment, factories across the United States could build launch tubes that gave infantrymen the power to take on tanks. No exotic metals or precision engineering were needed to build the bazooka. Each launcher could be put together in just 4 man-hours, and factory workers needed only 2 days of training to master the process. By 1944, the weapon was everywhere in American units. 5 bazookas were issued to every infantry company, and between 25 to 35 were assigned to each infantry battalion. Ammunition flowed easily through the existing supply network, a sharp contrast to the German system, which favored highly complex weapons that were difficult to mass produce and harder to maintain in the field. Training records from the U.S. Army reveal how much the bazooka changed infantry doctrine. In 1941, before the weapon existed, soldiers had to rely on anti-tank rifles that could not stop medium tanks, grenades that required suicidal close-range attacks, or Molotov cocktails used out of desperation. By 1943 through 1945, every infantryman went through a 2-hour introductory course on bazooka use. Soldiers were now taught tank hunting tactics and coordinated anti-tank defenses. Infantry school reports from this time made it clear: the bazooka gave the average soldier confidence against enemy armor. The fear that once caused tank panic was gone, replaced with aggressive ambush tactics. Combat reports showed creative uses of the weapon. In Italy, 2-man teams from the 3rd Infantry Division set up on upper floors of buildings, firing at tank vision blocks and turret rings. In Normandy, the 29th Infantry Division hid in hedgerows, striking side and rear armor in carefully coordinated ambushes. During the bitter winter fighting, soldiers of the 99th Infantry Division warmed rockets inside their coats to keep them functional, used snow camouflage for stealth, and targeted engine compartments to set German tanks ablaze. Army ordnance analysis revealed just how cost-effective the bazooka was. To destroy a single German tank using Sherman tanks, the cost averaged 5 Shermans lost per kill, about $187,500. Anti-tank guns cost about $45,000 for the gun and crew training. Aircraft, factoring in losses and munitions, averaged $85,000 per tank destroyed. A bazooka kill? About 5 rockets and sometimes a lost launcher, totaling just $50. This massive cost advantage, thousands to one, made the weapon a financial revolution in warfare. For the $75,000 price of one Sherman tank, the Army could instead field 3,000 bazookas and 20,000 rockets. The principle of a simple man-portable anti-tank weapon spread worldwide. Direct descendants included the M72 Law, the AT-4, the Carl Gustaf recoilless rifle, and the Soviet RPG series. Over 40 nations copied or adapted the bazooka, and the core idea, giving infantry the power to stop tanks, remains central to armies across the globe. Today, the German Tank Museum in Munster displays the bazooka in its permanent anti-tank exhibit. The placard there reads, "The American M1 rocket launcher bazooka revolutionized anti-tank warfare. Simple, cheap, and effective. It could be operated by any soldier with minimal training." German forces captured examples in Tunisia in 1943 and immediately recognized its value, developing the Panzerschreck in response. By the end of the war, widespread American bazooka use had neutralized German armored superiority. The bazooka itself saw constant upgrades. The original M1 with battery ignition entered service in June 1942, with 112,190 units produced. The improved M1A1 followed in June 1943, featuring a reinforced tube and better contacts with around 60,000 built. The M9 arrived in October 1943, with a two-piece design and magneto ignition, totaling 26,087 units. The M9A1 appeared in June 1944 with an optical sight and improved coupling, with roughly 277,800 manufactured. Finally, the M18, introduced in April 1945, was built from aluminum, though only 500 were produced before the war ended. Rocket development advanced alongside launchers. The M6 had a pointed nose with 3-inch penetration. The M6A3 introduced a blunt nose to prevent ricochets, achieving 4-inch penetration. The M10 carried white phosphorus for smoke and incendiary use, while the M7A3 served as a practice round. The U.S. Army Military History Institute's 1962 study concluded that no single weapon altered battlefield dynamics more than the M1-M9 bazooka. It gave every infantry unit the ability to defeat enemy armor, and the fact that Germany rushed to create their own version proved its impact. In terms of affordability, battlefield effect, and long-term influence, the bazooka was one of World War II's most decisive weapons. German records confirm the shift it caused. From 1940 to 1942, German tanks operated with confidence, often breaking through defenses with infantry scattering before them. After 1943, the story changed. With bazookas in the hands of American infantry, tanks could no longer roam freely. They now needed infantry protection at all times. Every building, hedgerow, and street corner became a possible ambush point. Breakthroughs became slower, bloodier, and far more costly. German war diaries document how the arrival of the bazooka completely shifted the battlefield balance in Europe. By March 1945, American factories were producing at peak levels, 42,000 launchers and 540,000 rockets in a single month. Production involved 237 subcontractors spread across 34 states. This wide network meant no single bombing raid or act of sabotage could cripple supply, unlike German production, which depended on a few vulnerable facilities. The design's simplicity made it easy to adopt across the Army. Records show an average soldier needed just 2 hours to gain basic proficiency, and after 5 live practice shots, most reached combat readiness. Unlike heavy anti-tank rifles, there were no special strength or endurance requirements. Men of all backgrounds could operate it effectively. This spread anti-tank capability across every squad, giving ordinary infantry the ability to stop armor. When compared to other weapons of the time, the bazooka's advantages were obvious. The British Piat weighed 32 lb, more than twice the bazooka's 15 lb. Its effective range was only 100 yd, compared to the bazooka's 300 yd, and it often malfunctioned in wet weather. The Soviet PTRD anti-tank rifle weighed 38 lb, had brutal recoil, was limited against medium tanks, and could only fire 1 shot before reloading. Germany's Panzerfaust was light and cheap, but it was single-use, had a very short range of only 30 to 60 mm, lacked sights, and produced a dangerous backblast. By contrast, the bazooka was portable, reusable, accurate at range, and deadly against armor. The weapon's influence went far beyond frontline use. Strategically, it allowed the U.S. to field lighter, more mobile divisions without sacrificing anti-tank power. Logistically, its rockets were far easier to supply than heavy shells for anti-tank guns. Training was simple enough to turn civilians into effective tank hunters in days. Psychologically, it replaced fear with confidence, turning infantry from tank victims into tank hunters. Economically, its low cost provided a staggering advantage over traditional anti-tank options. All of these factors combined gave the U.S. a clear edge in combined arms operations. The bazooka succeeded not through technical brilliance, but through practical simplicity. While Germany invested in advanced weapons, America focused on producing reliable, effective arms in massive numbers. By the end of the war, nearly every U.S. infantry squad had anti-tank capability. This reflected American doctrine: trust the citizen soldier, give him powerful weapons, and train him well. Germany began the war with the most feared tank forces in the world, sweeping across Poland and France with blitzkrieg. Yet by 1945, they were being stopped by American teenagers armed with steel tubes that cost less than a bicycle. The bazooka showed that in industrial war, mass production of simple, effective tools could defeat technically superior but scarce equipment. The story began with Lieutenant Edward Uhl's improvised launcher, built from a steel tube and coat hanger wire for sights. Within 3 years, from May 1942 to May 1945, American industry produced 476,628 launchers and over 15 million rockets. This achievement represented American industrial democracy at work, ordinary factories producing extraordinary weapons at unprecedented scale. The impact was both physical and psychological. Physically, the bazooka gave soldiers the ability to destroy tanks at realistic ranges. Psychologically, it changed how infantry faced armored assaults. No longer helpless, they became active hunters. German blitzkrieg, once unstoppable, slowed to a crawl as tanks risked ambush at every hedge, building, or pile of rubble. The weapon's success came not from complexity, but from accessibility. It could be built quickly, supplied easily, and operated by any trained soldier. This balance of simplicity, effectiveness, and mass production defined the American way of war. Use industrial power to overwhelm the enemy. Today, every modern army equips its infantry with portable anti-tank weapons, all direct descendants of the bazooka's principle. The idea, giving individual soldiers the means to destroy armored vehicles, remains as vital now as it was when Uhl first tested his rocket launcher at Aberdeen Proving Ground in 1942. The bazooka was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of American industry and trust in the citizen soldier. It proved that free workers in American factories could outproduce German engineering, and that ordinary men could be trusted with extraordinary firepower. German commanders were stunned that their tanks could be defeated by a cheap, simple launcher, costing less than a week's wages. In the end, the bazooka revealed a truth about modern war. Victory goes not to the side with the most advanced technology, but to the side that can produce the most effective weapons in the greatest numbers. As inscribed at the former U.S. Army Ordnance Museum, the bazooka was living proof that American ingenuity and mass production could triumph over complexity and craftsmanship. From Normandy's beaches to Italy's mountains, from France's hedgerows to the forests of the Ardennes, this steel tube helped end the Third Reich, one rocket at a time.